Speaker.
Apini Hanare.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity. I rise to take the short call and speak to the sale and supply of alcohol bill. It might interest the House to know that during the 2011 Rugby World Cup, I was an employee of the Māori television service, and I had the good fortune of commentating most of the rugby games held here in the country, of course, all the way up to the final. And while rolling down to the local pub and sharing a few beers with your good friends isn't quite up close and personal, certainly not as up close and personal as I got to experience through the 2011 Rugby World Cup, it was one of those fantastic opportunities, and to see just so many people come out and support the Rugby World Cup, not only just the locals, but of course the many tourists that came to New Zealand to support it. Mr. Speaker, I do have a few numbers here that I thought might interest the House, and these numbers are around the viewership of the Rugby World Cup of 2011. So over 2 million viewers tuned into the Rugby World Cup final in 2011 from here in New Zealand. It actually makes it the most watched event in the history of television in New Zealand. Interesting to note, in the top 10 of most watched events, most of them are sport, with the exception of the tragic passing of Princess Diana. So it actually speaks a lot to just what our people and what the country actually think about and how we feel about certain things. But just want to point out that most of the most watched events in the top 10 are sports related. Of those, rugby certainly dominate. So that's just the one, that's the viewership locally. I want to touch a little bit on the international viewership. So the Rugby World Cup 2011 final was the most watched event in New Zealand, as I've already mentioned. In France, however, the final attracted the largest television audience for the calendar year, with an average of 13.4 million viewers, a peak of 18.1 million and an audience share of 82% despite the early kick-off in France. 73% of France's total population of 63 million watched at least 15 minutes of the Rugby World Cup final. Now, those numbers are staggering. Those numbers are absolutely staggering, and while I don't think we will quite match France's viewership numbers, I certainly do hope that we'll get along and support our team in black. However, I do welcome this bill to the Select Committee, this hardest working Select Committee in the House, I'll argue. We look forward to debating some of the more technical points with regard to the bill. Some of those are around compliance, some of those are around the licences. And Mr. Speaker, I think it's timely just to remind the House, as our colleague Kevin Haig did, around some of the social costs around alcohol abuse. While I couldn't quite find the numbers of when our alcohol abuse numbers spike and at what time of day, I think it's fair to say that a lot of those crimes that are alcohol related do happen in the wee hours of the morning. So I do have a wee concern about those numbers. Some of those numbers, Mr. Speaker, you might be interested, that the tangible social costs of harmful alcohol use was just over $3.3 billion. Approximately a decade ago. Now, those numbers are concerning. What is also concerning in the breakdown of those numbers, Mr. Speaker, are the labour costs. Now, we know that if we extend the hours and you're able to go down and enjoy yourself between the hours of 4 and whatever it might be, and you share a beer with your colleagues and hope that you're okay to go to work, the breakdown in that cost for labour was over $1.7 billion was lost. Just in relation to alcohol use. So those are some numbers that I do have a few concerns about. I do hope that they can be fleshed out, discussed robustly during the Select Committee stage, and I look forward to making this bill certainly a bit more robust to ensure that, one, we enjoy the Rugby World Cup, and two, we do it safely. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.
David Seymour.